Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Budget Review Group meeting. Please be aware that this meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube and is also being recorded. Details of how the recordings are stored and how long they are retained for are available via the Council's website. Please note that as part of the Council's commitment to reducing paper, electronic devices may be used throughout the meeting. I won't read out the emergency procedure, as I assume we're all comfortable with that. Okay, great. So the first item tonight is the appointment of the chair for the meeting. Do I have any nominations? Councillor Hales.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Milton.
And does that find a seconder? Yep, Councillor Dixon. Are there any further nominations? No, in which case, can I have a show of hands for Councillor Milton to be chair, please? And that's approved unanimously.
Great, thank you everyone. Thank you for putting me in the chair. I will do my best to guide our discussions appropriately. Thank you officers and the portfolio holder as well for attending this evening. My first item on the agenda, service item 2, is apologies. I've received apologies from Councillor Day and Councillor Brown. Are there any other further apologies that we're aware of? Okay, I take that as a no. Declarations of interest. Are there any items that members wish to declare an interest on? Councillor Falp.
I'm not sure. Do we have to declare an interest if we use the leisure centres? I'm not an actual member, but I do use the leisure centres regularly.
You can make that declaration, yes. That's fine.
And Councillor Dixon and Councillor...
I need to declare I do use the leisure centres and I am a member.
We also have Councillor Luckhurst.
Declare an intention to use it. not sure that counts. But.
That's not actually good enough, Councillor Luckhurst. It won't get you anywhere. Councillor Whiteman, did I see you?
Yeah, very similar, I'm afraid. An intent to use it more than I do, but occasional use.
Councillor Chilvers. Okay. Right. Any other declarations? No, right, okay, so the only item that we have to consider this evening is item 5 of the Cabinet agenda, which is the fees and charges for 2026, 2027. I'm going to ask, I think, coming to the portfolio holder to introduce this, and then to Mr. Rollins, our Section 151 officer, to make any other comments he may wish to. And then I've got some thoughts on how we structure this as a discussion, which I'll lay out if members are happy. So, Councillor Chilvers, let's start with you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And yes, I'm glad that we've got an opportunity to look at this paper in the round this evening, given the importance of fees and charges to our overall income as a council. When you think that council tax brings in about £11 million for us as an organisation, and then and business rates 7 million, and then fees and charges come up to around I think it's 8 to 10 million in total. Parking being about 5 million, bereavement services 2 million, green bin permits 2 million, and then there's also the other leisure charges. So we're talking sort of really significant amounts of money, and that's why it's been so important in terms of how we look at the MTFS. Over the last year, we've done like a big review of the fees and charges, bringing commercial gov to look at what's realistic to achieve in terms of our fees and charges generation. And we inherited previously that we had this 10% year-on-year income expectation growth that we inherited, which of course, if we've got that total of about 10 million, you're looking at an increase of £1 million, close on £1 million a year, which is a massive increase every year that we were looking at. And so basically the work with Commercial Gov ended up saying, well, actually, when you look at what we've actually bought in each year, apart from the year that we introduced green bin charges, we've never come close to meeting that 10% increase. And so we really want to try and model it better. So in advance of the last budget in February, we had actually changed that target amount. So for everything apart from parking green bins, we said, right, the realistic amount, the target is 3%. And then, but parking and green bin permits stayed at a 10% target. And of course, changing that assumption made this massive extra gap in the MTFS modelling. And so in February, we allocated £1 million extra of one-off funding that came in through the settlement and business rates over performance to cover that gap over the next 2 to 3 years. And Mr. Rollins, our estimate in January and February was about 500,000 to 600,000 gap, and Mr. Rollins very said, I think prudently we need to put a bit more in that in. And so we put £1 million in, and so that has proved to be the case that coming around this cycle, because we've underperformed our expectation in green bin charges income, which I'm sure we'll discuss, that's created a gap over future years. The other thing that I just want to say, which we say every year, is that expectation of growth, whether it be 3% or 10%, is of total income, not price increase. Because there's more than, just because you increase prices by 10% doesn't mean to say you're going to get an increase of income by 10%, because it depends how the market reacts to that increase. Maybe the best example of this is on the collection of bulky items, which the council offers a waste service. And a couple of years ago, Councillor Roberts really worked with officers to actually say, well, actually, we want to reduce that because the price is putting people off, we're getting more fly tipping. We reduced that price, and our total income from that service went up the next year. So that price reduction was really, really effective. And so just to bear that in mind, all the time we're talking about total income. And so this year, one of the things that I've been particularly asking for as portfolio holder, and that we've been talking about with officers, is to try and look at services more in the round. So not just thinking about, oh, we're going to stick a charge up here, but thinking about that whole service planning. And I think the best example of that is going to come when we talk about bereavement services, because we recognise that there's quite a lot of commercial marketplace competition, and it's not just a simple case of let's put the charge up and hope that the income goes up. We've got to do that rounder look, which is where it links in with the change programme. I think those are kind of all the introductory remarks I want to make, and I look forward to sort of diving into the various issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chilvers. Mr. Rollins, do you want to add anything before we dive in?
Yeah, sure. So what I'll add will focus on what the report actually covers in terms of recommendations. So the report, as Councillor Chilvers has set out, details the proposals for the discretionary fees and charges in respect of the 2026-27 year, and recommends to Council the fees and charges proposals set out in appendices A1 and A2 to the report to operate from the 2nd of January 2026, unless stated otherwise. And it recommends to Council the changes proposed by everyone active to the core products and prices for the leisure services, as set out in Appendix C. As Jonathan has alluded to, we changed the metrics and way we were setting the target as part of budget setting in February 2025, agreeing 3% on all discretionary fees and charges, which is CPI plus 1% at the time we were setting it. with car parking and green waste having their own separate targets, around circa 10% per annum. Through this report, we have generated or proposed to generate more income next year through the changes that are proposed. However, this target is down on what we'd set at budget setting in February, in the region of around £260,000. A significant amount of that can be attributed to the changes we've made to the green waste permits projections in terms of the number we expect to distribute. And that no doubt will be covered in today's meeting. It should be noted that one of our key income drivers, car parking, is absent from the fees and charges report at the moment. It is expected that they will come forward as part of the parking strategy in November Cabinet.
Great, thank you, Mr. Rollins. Thank you, Councillor Chilvers. So that was a useful introduction. What I propose, if members are comfortable with this, is the way we approach this is that we start at the top, if you like. So we look at performance overall and some of the issues around the commercial strategy as well. And I want to pause on that as well, because we had a bit of a discussion at scrutiny about it last night, and then go into the detail of some of the specific charges themselves. So rather than start there, actually let's start at the top and look at the strategy and what's being proposed. And the three areas of detail I think are worth going into are green bin charges, if I can say it, crematorium, and leisure charges as well, particularly as they relate to Kenilworth, which aren't set yet, so those are probably worth exploring. Are there any other fee or details areas that members would like to explore this evening? Councillor Barton.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'd just like clarification on the car parking charges.
Okay, so maybe we actually cover that one before we go into green bin and crematorium, just to get a view on that as well. Okay, all right. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of background around the commercial strategy. So I think it was when this group met in February. I think one of the things that we requested was that that a commercial strategy was brought forward by officers and the Cabinet and approved. That was down to be reviewed by ONS. Unfortunately, that's been delayed on a number of occasions. And having spoken to Mr. Rollins, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say it's really been down to a lack of resource, I think is fair to say. I have a concern about that, because I think that then it actually impacts how we approach setting fees and charges. So if members are comfortable and would endorse me actually taking a comment to Cabinet on Thursday, tomorrow, to ask them to give this priority and ensure that resources are put behind it due to the importance of it, and perhaps expressing our, I think, our disappointment that we haven't seen the report as yet. So it's not a case of, I think it's just a case of making sure we're holding people to account on this and asking for those resources to be put forward. So are members happy for me to take those comments to Cabinet? Great, thank you. Do you want to come in, Mr. Rollins?
Yeah, in terms of resources, ultimately it's me as a resource that is the challenge. So I've had a number of pressures in terms of different work streams that I've had to prioritise over that. And obviously I appreciate that's disappointing. I don't want a backlog of work either. But in terms of the prioritisation, the proposed timeline that I set out to you in an email, which was that I think it's on the forward plan for March, really aligns with the fact that we've got budget setting and the close down of accounts and the backstop date in February as well. So in terms of the new priorities that have come up and superseded it in the short term, which has resulted in the delay, does mean that delay is more substantial than I would like.
And I completely understand that, and I think I think what we're asking for is to make sure that you have the resources to do that. If it's not you, then it's someone somewhere else. Councillor Chilvers.
Yeah, and I very much sort of welcome that comment coming from you as a committee, and you know, I'll make sure that we have that conversation with Mr. Rollins to make sure we can plan that work in. There is quite extensive, you know, finance has extremely extensive work planning because there are obviously competing priorities, and we will have those conversations and make sure that we can come back to you with that kind of timeline and expectation so that you can hold us to account.
Thank you, Councillor Chilvers. Right, so let's move on from that particular item into, let's start with I'm interested in members' questions about the shape of the budget, our performance. I'm interested, I'll kick off with just one, Councillor Chilvers, but I do want to hear from members. So we set the new target at 3% in terms of increased income. What's our forecast for what we're actually going to achieve this year in terms of percentage?
So I think it's actually over that. I think Mr. Rollins has probably, he's going through the report. I know it's in the report, isn't it? So
Yeah, so the change within the report is proposing that the change between 25, 26, 26, 27 is 3.22%.
No, sorry, I'm actually talking about the year that we're in. So we set the target this year for 3%. What do we forecast that we're actually going to achieve this year?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, do you want to jump in there?
So in Appendix A1, the latest forecast is presented by service area. So at budget setting, and to caveat this does exclude car parking at this stage. The original budget forecast was 7.248 million. The latest forecast is 7.182 million.
Do we know what gap we're expected to make up from? What's the difference that car parking is making to that?
I was going to say, so that number excludes car parking, so that's the on the other activities excluding car parking.
Tony, do you want me in terms of?
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, just to add, in terms of the difference, I think a lot of the, so obviously it's a forecast as at this point in time, and some of the forecasts are like sort of been done to budget kind of thing, which there invariably won't be. So there is a bit of sort of like the variability in that, and you know what the end number will be, you know, because we're trying to forecast quite a number of months ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to find what was in the Q1 report. So that would have contained a forecast specific for that area. So I might just have to come back to you on that one.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to get to is an understanding of now, you know, we used to have a target of 10% and we'd only hit 4 or 5% in most years. We've now got a target of 3%. I'm just wondering, are we hitting 3% or are we underachieving on that as well? It sounds like we're slightly behind on where we should be.
Yes, well, that's showing that we're kind of just sort of 70,000 behind, excluding car parking, which I would say is within a tolerance, you know, an acceptable tolerance. I'm not clear about what the car parking return is. I think I'd have heard if it was way behind.
Okay, so I'm going to stop talking and hand over to members, which is what I should do. So, Councillor Phillips, and I've got Councillor Hayes.
I may be able to help you if I've understood your question correctly, Councillor Milton. If I'm looking at the same fees and charges, we're up 4.6% in 25-26 versus 24-25, and 4.1% is the proposed budget against 26-27. I think that's what you were asking. I'm just taking the simple numbers here on the chart, excluding, again, car parking.
Okay.
I was assuming you were asking how we were performing against current year budget.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, is if we've set it for, what's our performance against this current year budget? And that would be helpful to know, because it just gives us some reassurance about whether the targets that we're setting for next year are actually likely to be met. Councillor Hales, shall I come to you?
No, thank you, Chair. I think my challenge with the report is that it feels a bit piecemeal. So for me to be able to understand what the fees and charges report is, I would almost need the car parking strategies to be in there, because it feels as though we're going on, I mean, almost as this meeting is like a month early, because I'm not quite sure in terms of how we can sit here with the fees and charges paper and say, this is what we think it should be, without the car parking strategy being there. So I'm probably a bit perplexed in terms of what we're doing here at this point now, because without that car parking strategy, we're going to agree X, but we're not sure what Y is going to be. So I'm not sure what use we can provide to Cabinet or to officers without the whole information being there.
Councillor Chilvers.
So I think we're very clear that because we've excluded car parking completely, so the fees and charges car park will be decided at a later date in November, but we've also said, right, well, we're expecting that 10% increase from parking, so kind of ring-fenced that expected growth within parking, which allows us to look at the remainder of fees and charges and say, right, okay, here's the expected income across all the services, and to make decisions within those. So, and to go through all those individual services and make sure those are sensible. So in an ideal world, of course, I'd say we want parking to be with it. I don't think it detracts from making decisions about all the other services.
I appreciate in terms of from the portfolio holder, you've probably seen that information, but certainly as members, I haven't seen in terms of what, I know you're saying, and I'm not doubting you at all in terms of what you're saying, but I think just from trying to set up fees and charges and give the impact into Cabinet in terms of what the views of this committee is, I suppose I'm struggling to understand in terms of, you know, we've got green bins, we've got certain areas in there, but without the car parking, which obviously is a huge amount of the income that comes into the fees and charges, to me, it feels as though we're a month early. If we, you know, to be able to give paper back to Cabinet and to help in terms of giving advice, it feels we're going to set fees and charges on some areas tonight, but without having the car parking strategy, it just isn't balanced from my point of view.
Go on, Councillor Chilvers.
So I think what you're saying is, say, for instance, the car parking fees and charges came through, and the projection was well down on maybe that 10%, and car parking came back and said, oh, we think we can only do 5%. What I think you're saying is, well, in the light of that information, we might have wanted to set a different charge for green bins. Is that kind of the angle? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I'm sorry. I'm not saying that we said, because obviously it sits with Cabinet. But I think in terms of trying to give valuable feedback into Cabinets, I'm just not convinced at the moment that we can sit here tonight as a committee and say, this is what we think you should do, because actually, and I'm sure it's a brilliant car parking strategy, I've no doubt at all in terms of doing that, but just without that piece of, if it was something incredibly small like, I don't know, the price of Council Dixon's pen in terms of doing that, that's absolutely fine, but with something that's so significant to the council, if we sit there tonight and we say, this is what we think you should do, and then the car parking strategy comes back and says, like you said, it's Y, it just feels like we're not going to give very helpful advice as a committee, and that is what I would view the aim of this committee is tonight.
I think I'd echo your point, actually, Councillor Hales, because I think the point we're making is what we've tried to do with this committee, whilst we will talk about some of the individual charges, it's not actually just a discussion about individual charges, it is a discussion about the part that fees and charges play in the overall financing of the council. And that's difficult to do without, I think what you're saying is that's difficult to do when a big chunk of it is actually missing. So we will probably inevitably end up having a conversation about more of the detail rather than the strategy behind it, because there's a big piece missing. And that's not necessarily the best use of the brains that you've got around the table.
So I hear what you're saying, and as I say, in an ideal world, we would have preferred it to all come together. But as I say, so I think it would be useful to have that current year parking thing, which might give us some reassurance that actually then when we're building on that for next year, that we're sort of building on that firm base. But I certainly think that, I think by ring fencing it and saying, right, we're aiming for that 10% and we think that's reasonable to do, actually it doesn't, I think we can still look at the rest and it be a fruitful conversation, because I think we can ring fence that parking and be within that bounds of that 10%. So I hear what you're saying, but I'm not overly concerned about it. If in a month or two that parking is like, oh no, we can only deliver 5%, then you'll come back to me and go, and then I'll say, yep, you were right. But I'm not overly concerned at this point about that.
Mr. Rollins, then I'm going to come to Councillor Barton. Promise.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, actually. It would be useful if we had all of the parts here ready to present to you. In terms of getting the information that is ready out when it is available, I feel that this is still a useful conversation, because a lot of the elements we've got in will go into the detail. There will be elements where we could challenge whether some of those targets on the individual basis are appropriate. And then when we feed this fees and charges and the information that's into the base budget, we'll have the parking strategy alongside that in November. And then the decisions will be around, if there is a gap, how do we fund that on a recurrent basis? So will that be through use of non-recurrent reserves? Will it be a change in the change programme? Will it be a reliance on the local finance settlements, which we know won't get until December? And that'll feed into the discussions for February as well. So this is, although it may seem it's come early, actually I still think it's beneficial to feed into that overall story of how we set the budget come February. So we can look at these parts. Then when the parking strategy comes, that'll feed into the base budget, and then the final part when we set the council tax in February.
Okay, right. Thank you. Councillor Barton, let's come to you.
Yeah, thank you. I find myself in an unusual position. I tend to agree with Councillor Childers. Can I ask, for a reason I'll explain in a minute, can I ask Mr. Rollins, what were those figures that were expected and actual that you gave 20 minutes ago? That I believe was £70,000 deficit, was it? That Councillor Childers said. So we're expected to take how much?
Yeah, so in Appendix A1, our budget setting for 25-26, we set a fees and charges target, excluding car parking, of 7.25 million. And we are at 7.18 million. I'm reasonably happy about that. As Councillor Chilwell says, it's only 70,000 out. And I'm reasonably quite happy in keeping car park charging out for what came out at ONS last night. Now, the council is looking to save £80,000 a year on car parking. And when I quizzed at ONS last night, it was that at the moment, Warwick District Council pay what they call a convenience fee of 20 odd pence per transaction, or whatever it is. And Mr. Knight was looking at putting that onto the car parker, declaring interest there. Probably same with crematorium, I suppose. I might use that one day. So I would rather keep car parking separate, because if we're looking at putting car park as a separate item, because if we're looking at putting car parking charges up, we could actually be double taxing, in effect, putting car park charges up by 10p and then bugging the convenience fee on as well. So that could be 30p. So there's a bit of work to do on car parking charges and this convenience charge and how all this works with the NPP. So I'd rather keep it separate, and being as we forecast 7.25 and at the moment it's 7.18. Well, forecast 7.18. I don't think it's that bad. But I would like to keep car parking out of it, and I do believe we can have a discussion about what's in front of us excluding. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barton. Others on just the strategy and the approach? Do we have other questions? Councillor Felt, then Councillor Dixon. Thank you.
I'm going to disagree with my Witness Resident Association councillor. I think what... I'm always disagreeing with him, so it's all right. I think what we're saying is we feel we're missing a piece of information. I think that's what we're really saying. And to give a true thoughts to Cabinet, we are missing a piece of information. I think it's as simple as that. It's not so much, you know, how much or whatever. It's just we have not got the true picture. We haven't got the full picture. And I think that's makes me feel uncomfortable because I can't say to Councillor Chilvers tomorrow, yes, it's great, you know, we've still got a little piece of missing information. I think that's what we're trying to get at. That without that, we can't give you a full, you know, full MOT because we don't know if the lights are working.
Councillor Barton, did you want to come back on this point?
Yes, yeah. Can I ask my learned friend, I presume we may have a budget meeting in November or early December when this car parking comes in. I presume. Was that a yes? Can you say that on record? As opposed to nodding.
Yes, there's a cabinet meeting, I believe, on the, is it the 28th of November? Yeah, and budget review meet on the 27th.
Okay, so we will be coming to meet again where we'll be having a discussion about the other half and hopefully everything will be tickety-boo, but it may not be. Right, Councillor Dixon, did you want to talk about car parking? Because I've got Councillor Rossou showing as well who might want to talk about car parking.
Thank you, Jen. No, I thought we were still talking sort of big picture strategic stuff rather than specifics of individual charges.
Well, I think in this context, to be fair, the car parking is strategic because we're thinking about what are we considering this evening. So I will come to Councillor Rossou.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I'm a bit concerned of the lateness of the car parking report. I mean, it to come Cabinet in late November and then to Council, I presume, on 3rd of December. Will we have enough time to make all the changes for January?
Ms. Court.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Originally, the parking strategy, we did plan to have it ready for sort of September, October. There was slippage outside of our control. But we will have accurate enough time to implement the fees and charges because we don't actually put them up until April. That was agreed last year. So, you know, we need time to do the parking order and change all the tariffs and everything. So there is ample time. And the National Parking Platform, which I believe Cabinet agreed for the Council to join earlier this year, that won't be introduced until at least February. And I think that was discussed last night, wasn't it? And just to reassure people on the convenience fee, one of the benefits of the MPP is that it will be a competitive market. So all of the providers of the pay by phone, they will be competing with each other on this platform. So it will be in their interest to make the prices lower. And we will be doing some comms to show people how to sign out of getting reminders, because you're automatically, on some apps, you're automatically signed in to get reminders that your parking session's about to expire. So we will be doing some comms to minimise those costs. But like I say, you know, we are hopeful that it will become quite a competitive market. So hopefully that helps with that question.
Right, Councillor Chilvers, then I am going to try and move the committee on from car parking. You want to talk about car parking? Sorry.
No, I do want to talk about strategic stuff, which does include car parking report as well.
Okay, right, Councillor Chilvers.
Just say I've had extensive discussions with Councillor Roberts, who, by the way, does apologise that he isn't here this evening, but he will definitely be here for all the car parking conversations, which he is very much looking forward to. Extensive conversations with Councillor Roberts about making sure that this timetable for car parking strategy and then the fees and charges that come out of it does fit within what we need to do in terms of get it ready, but also making sure that members have proper time to consider it. So, having that briefing in the calendar for the end of October, and then being able to, groups to be able to discuss it before coming into ONS and budget review group and cabinet and council. So we have looked at the timetable very, very closely, and I've pushed him quite hard on making sure it works.
Great, thank you. Can I just, let's probably pause and just sum up. Are members happy if I just add a comment into cabinet that actually there was concern amongst a number of members, not all, Councillor Barton, about the absence of the parking strategy and our ability to scrutinise the fees and charges budget as a whole as a result. I think that will probably do. Right, Councillor Dixon, we'll come to you now.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, when the car parking document does come, I will take a particular interest in that it's not just about the fees and the charges, but it's also about which sites as well that's within that. I do share Councillor Phelps' concerns on this. Can I raise a couple of what may appear to be weird and wacky, but maybe slightly strategic issues? Coming from a commercial background, if you weren't hitting target, one would say, well, what do we do for our staff to encourage them to generate more income? And I look at the values of the organisation, which appear on the screensaver, the four of them there, and I'm thinking, yeah, there should be something that somebody should think constantly, how can I generate more income? But am I right in thinking that there is nobody who receives any extra remuneration in the council for generating any extra remuneration for taxpayers?
So I'm not quite sure. Are you asking whether there's performance-related pay for generating income? I'm not quite clear what the question is.
No, this isn't performance. This would be achievement.
So are you asking, is it on the organisation who, as part of their job description, is to generate income? Is that the question?
Is anybody receive extra pay for generating extra income?
Extra pay for extra income sounds like performance-related pay, which I don't think in the council we have any structure around that. Mr. Rollins, do you want to come?
Nothing specific around that. We do have an honorarium process, so we do on occasion recognise staff for going above and beyond. Potentially that can be where they've acted up, where there's been an absence in staffing, and without a formal acting up process where they've gone above and beyond. But we don't have a specific performance results related mechanism.
That may be why perhaps it's not top of people's priorities list to generate more income constantly all the time. I'll move on to my second point.
Do you want to come back, Councillor?
Yes, so I think that the general question around I think you're kind of almost asking a mindset question, which again I think feeds into that wider conversation about the commercial strategy and how as an organisation we can be more commercial. I think my reflection on what the fees and charges process used to be like was that people used to go, oh, we need to put fees and charges up by this amount, and kind of not really consider that wider commercial thing about whether putting a price up would actually get a commensurate increase in income, or whether it would actually lead to a tail off, or whether actually it might be better to put prices down. And not really a deep engagement with those questions. And so, and that's borne out by that table in 1.28 in the report about whether the target was 3% or 15%, actually, there was no real correlation between the target and the outcome. And that's why we have tried to move away as an organisation from that into saying, okay, what can we do to improve our service? What can we do to generate income? And asking officers to look at that in the round and I don't know if Mr. Rollins wants to add anything on this, but actually I think that change of culture is happening, and I've been really pleased with what we're now seeing come through the change programme of people going, we could redesign our service like this, which we think would bring in more income.
Mr. Rollins?
Yeah, to expand on that, I'm glad you said change programme, because that was where I was going to go from a organisational perspective. The change programme, when it was implemented, had a number of strands on it, and one of them was focused on our digital services, but one of them was also focused on the fees and charges. Last year we had the independent review of commercialisation, which presented a number of findings, and some of those we've put in place last year. We're continuing to evolve that process, which will ultimately culminate in the commercial strategy when it comes in March. We do have regular engagement with our staff through the internal forums we have, Managers Forum being one of them, where the change programme is a regular item. The change programme board meets on a bi-monthly basis to discuss change proposals that come forward, and many of those are around income generation, where the staff in the service will come and present their business case. So internally we are, through senior leadership team and the members, we are managing that process and that engagement with staff, so staff are aware of what's important. There's also that context of what's happening more widely in local government, and the challenge will be for a number of discretionary services, it's important that they become value-adding as well to whatever a future organisation looks like. And because while we may deliver some services that are discretionary at this moment in time, that may not, from an income perspective, add value, they add value to our communities. That may be different, or there may be a different perspective on that in a couple of years' time. So there's a piece that we're working on around ensuring that some of the discretionary services that we offer, they do add value from a community perspective and also from a financial perspective. So that work is taking place.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a couple of other quick points, and you talked about the change programme and other changes. One of the big things, obviously, is local government reorganisation on this, and there's a lot of attention on council tax harmonisation within that, because council taxpayers in different parts of Warwickshire pay different amounts for a typical Band D house, but they also pay different fees and charges as well. So looking at the Cremation Society's figures, I noticed that Nuneaton is the 11th most expensive place in the UK to get cremated, whereas in Warwick District, it's the 59th most expensive place. And I just wonder whether strategically there's any work to look at harmonising fees and charges as part of the preparation for local government reorganisation.
At this stage, not. That's likely to come following a decision, hopefully in the spring. In terms of engagement, we are starting to have that across the various councils. So I'm meeting with my counterparts on a quite frequent cadence at the moment. A lot of that ahead of our submission to meet the November deadline. But whatever that is submitted in November, that work will continue, and that has continued with the County Council as well, being party to those conversations. So that work will continue, but we'll probably pick up once we've got a clear steer on the direction. In terms of bereavement services in particular, we do have a separate piece of work that is going on. So we've commissioned Commercial Gov to support us to do additional work in terms of how we make that service more commercially minded in terms of how it sits in the external environment it operates. There are a number of private entities that provide services of a very competitive nature. So while you're comparing with Nuneaton, for example, they're probably not our biggest competitor locally. It tends to be ones in the private sector. And we're looking at how we can make our offering more attractive and competitive in that sense. One of the proposed angles is making sure that we've got a more effective website. I know from setting the fees and charges, our website is part of the Warwick District Council website, so it is just a list of charges, which may not be particularly, it doesn't represent the service in the same way that a private commercial entity would have a website that would be more attractive and enticing, and the fees were kind of, they're important, but they're secondary to actually the environment in which and the sensitive nature in which people are having to use that service. And part of the work we are doing is around making sure that our service sits, while it is a council-provided service, sits in a more commercially minded environment.
But yeah, just one other quick question, which I'm actually would ask I think if Councillor Redford were here, she might ask, are there any fees and charges that take account of armed forces personnel and ex-armed forces personnel?
I may need to come back to you on that one. There's a lot of charges.
Yeah, great, thank you. Councillor Dixon. Councillor Dre.
Ask about the planning fees. It just says that it's not being covered by the cost of delivering the service because of staffing levels. And I was just wondering if we're breaking even on that, or is there a deficit because of things not being paid?
Mr. Rollins?
Which service was that again? Sorry.
Planning.
One of the challenges we have with the planning sector is that a number of the fees we don't have overall control of how we set them. There is work going on with central government, so there has been consultations around setting planning fees that actually represent cost recovery to councils, because while it is a discretionary service to use, it's not a discretionary service for a council to offer, so that it has put councils in a position where they are under-recovering on delivering those services. That piece of work is still ongoing, and once central government outline what they will be, that will likely come forward as well, probably through the change programme, I believe.
Is that okay? Great, thank you, Councillor Dre. Right, I've got Councillor Luckhurst. Councillor Luckhurst, is this a question about the overall strategy, or are we starting to get down into?
I was just thinking, I'm not entirely sure which area this fits into, so it might be best I just ask it now and then you can kick it down to the right bit, if that's okay. It's a bit of a strange one, so I'm not sure if it'll even get an answer tonight, but I was looking at licensing fees.
Can I hold you there then?
Yes.
Just pop your mic off, sorry. I will come back to you and we'll do licensing fees. Are there any other questions about sort of the broad thrust and the strategy of the fees and charges? I'm not getting any nods, so that's fine. Right, so Councillor Luckhurst, I'm going to let you go now on the on your question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so licence fees, obviously not intended or permitted to generate income for the council. So if there's some way that the cost of the fee were to come down, I'm not going to speculate as to how, would we then have to cut what we charge? Like I said, sorry, it's a bit of a strange one, that. So,
in theory, by the definition that they should not be commercially income generating, then yes, the likelihood is that we don't see a reduction in those costs unless there's a significant change in how that service is delivered. Maybe licensing is probably not a good example, but if there's an element of automation that reduce the actual cost of delivering that service, then there may be an expectation that those charges are reviewed in that context.
yeah, automation was the thing I was thinking. I didn't want to say AI, don't want to go down that route now, but yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Luckhurst. Right, so let's try and come back to the order of things. Let's go into green bin charges. Councillor Phelps, let's go. Off to you first.
Yeah, it's, I suppose B5 got, and I know other residents have as well. The charge is going up again. We reduce how much we think we're going to get because we're not getting so many. I get really cross, and I said this at another meeting. I struggle to put anything in my bin from November till about March. I try my best because I've paid for the whole year. How have we looked at suspending the service, as some do, from November till February, March, is this an issue we can't do because the way we're set up with the bin collections, etc.? But my residents are saying, can't use it half the year. You're putting it up every year. You know, what is the point? Why am I doing it? I'll not bother. And along with the warm summer, I think that is putting people off. So it's really, have you looked, and I know the idea about green bags would be great, especially for people who haven't got as big a garden as I have. But yeah, it annoys me that I'm paying for something, I'm going to pay more and I can't use it half the time. But I don't think we do 6 months permits. No, I think it's something we should be looked at as a resident, and as residents, because yes, I know we've got to balance the books, make income from this, but we're also providing a service. So I'm pleased Zoe's here that I can nag her.
Thank you. That is a really good question, and it is something that we will look at, because we are looking at what other authorities do in ways of green sacks so that we can introduce a new income stream, because it is successfully done in other councils, so we could look at suspending it for longer. But I think the issue would be, it's the way the contract is written, that those trucks are for garden waste only and those operatives are for garden waste only. And if we didn't run it for, I mean, we have that fortnight break, don't we, over Christmas and New Year. But if we were to make it any longer, it may implicate the workforce at Biffa. So the way that the contract was written was for a 2-week break because they're so busy with the extra recycling. But I think it's something that we can take away and look at when we're looking at changes to the contract, definitely, because it is a good suggestion. Thank you.
Supplementary, when is the contract due to be renegotiated? Can you remember offhand?
So it's an 8-year contract, so it would expire July 2030. So we will be looking. We normally start looking at contracts of that size about 2 years before. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Fountain. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, and it's following up on green bin charges. I note that the total income is going up only 4.4%, but the green bin is going up from, 47 to 51, which is about 10%, rather, 8.5%. Thank you, Councillor Chilvers. So are we therefore anticipating a further decline in the number of permits sold? I think it went down to something like 38,000 this year, so are we anticipating a decline to about 35, 36,000? And if so, I know this is about revenue, but is there also a cost saving on the other side to compensate from the lower volumes?
So this is the first year that we've seen a decline in permit sales, and that has been across the whole of the county. So we've checked in with all of our sort of other districts, and it's also been reported that the tonnages of green waste are down. A lot of it is down to the weather, and everyone has sold less green bin, the permits. So I think what we can't say with any degree of certainty at this point, because it's the first year we've seen a slight decline. I think we're about 1,500 short of what we thought we would sell, and I think it will become more apparent next year. There is that risk, isn't there, that the more you put it up, some people will look to do something, you know, they won't buy it, which is why we want to look at the alternative of the sack, so that there is an alternative for people that, you know, perhaps it is something that they will think twice about.
Yeah, and that is exactly my concern, that we're going over a figure starting with 5 rather than 4. That reaches a tipping point. Have we seen any increase in green waste tipping, or is it purely, I mean, I think we all can remember this summer we didn't have to do nearly as much mowing as we normally do, so I can understand that. But have we seen any signs of people beginning to reject the size of the charge?
As in, do you mean fly tipping garden waste? Yeah, no, that has not gone up. Fly tipping is going down across the whole district, so you know we're really pleased with that. And we're not seeing the reports of green waste being tipped, but again we categorise all of our fly tipping, so it's something we will be watching. We will also need to keep an eye on garden waste being put in the wrong wheelie bin, so that is something that we need to be aware of, because that's contamination. So you know, those are things that we are aware of, and we will be monitoring closely throughout, you know, if this price is agreed.
But you are expecting to decline because you've got less income coming in than just the raw increase in price would expect. sorry, you are expecting a decline in the number of permits sold next year because you're getting less income increase than the actual increase in the price of the licence or the permit.
I think we're being realistic that we might see a drop-off based on the stats that we've seen here. But we're going to do more marketing because we think that lots of the new build estates that we're seeing pop up, they're not actually buying the permits. Whether or not that's because they've got smaller gardens, because they're newer builds, but we are looking at doing some welcome packs when we deliver the bins. We make them aware of the garden waste permits, because traditionally the developers only supply the essential bins, so the grey bin, the food bin and the blue lidded bin. So lots of these people may not even know we do this collection. So we are going to up our marketing, and then we will be looking at the garden waste sacks as an alternative as well. But yeah, that potentially we will see a decline, and whether that's weather or the cost, I think we'll have to watch closely next year.
As a final minor remark, I do notice that we're still advertising the green bin towards we're mid-October on the website. I'm not sure at this time of year it's the best use of money, but anyway, that's encouraging.
We do sell them throughout because of all the leaves coming off the trees. So we do see a little spike in October, yeah.
Councillor Chilvers wants to come in.
Yes, so this is a question that that Councillor Roberts and myself and the Cabinet and officers have spent quite a lot of time discussing, because there's a number of factors that kind of we've tried to take into consideration. So nationwide, the average cost of a green bin permit is £62. So we're still kind of significantly below that, and some authorities charge over £100. And so it's interesting, like people's kind of the elasticity and people's perception of what an appropriate charge is obviously sort of varies around in the country. As Ms Court's been saying, so far every year, regardless of price increase, the amount of permits we sold grew quite considerably. So this is the first year that hasn't happened. And as I say, we just don't know whether that's how much of that is due down to the weather. We know that some of it is likely. It's a reasonable hypothesis, given that everyone around the country, councils around the country have had that, regardless of whether they put price up or not, they've all had that impact. So it seems, or not all, I think, but so it's likely that might have happened, but we can't definitely say the level of that impact. Commercial Gov kind of modelled a thing which kind of said, well, we think that above inflation for every £1 extra you might lose X hundred. But to be honest, as far as I can work out, that's just as much a stab in the dark than we could do. You know, they're maybe looking at a wider data set. So we do want to carry on collecting data and look at the patterns of behaviour. And I know we're kind of trying to put together some more of that data and making sure we've got that for future years. So what the main thing in terms of your question about drop-off is that we've done is because the modelling we did in January to try and work out how big the gap in the fee, the MTFS would do, we were still projecting an ongoing rise in permits up to the level of which Biffa needed a new thing, which I think was 44,000 up was the maximum they can take.
It's
around that. And so we were modelling a continuing growth. What we've done now is just temper that down over a number of years to kind of just level that off, and that's what's kind of created the longer term extra gap. And I think we're just going to carry on have to monitor this closely, try and get the data and be smart about how we do it, and look at how we can introduce the green bag income stream especially for those new builds, because there's a market there that we're not reaching. There's plenty of new build streets where the lorry's not going down at all, and we think there are opportunities there for us to provide a good service to residents that we're not doing at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chilvers. Mr. Rollins just wanted to come in.
Yeah, what you'll see in the report is that in terms of number of permits sold against our original projections, they are down. But in terms of what we're setting for next year, the 38,500 that's forecast is in line with sales this year. So the drop-off really is against the overall number of properties in the district, so the proportion of properties that are taking up that service. So we're expecting the number of permits we sell to be similar to this year. It will just be actually, we won't be taking advantage of the growing district, which is where we do have drop-offs that are linked to the price. The marketing work that Mrs. Court has alluded to is where we need to target new customers to fill in that gap.
Thank you. Councillor Barton.
Thank you, Chair. Surely it's not so much how many we've sold. There's got to be a figure where we actually break even or make a profit. If we need 39,000 to break even, then it's going to be a permanent loss. If we need 38.5 to break even, then great. New builds, yeah, that's an interesting one. It's all built on a postage stamp. And with the cost of living, I don't think if you get a bill come in for 50 quid, you're going to think, no, I'm not going to bother. So how many do we need to sell to either break even or make a profit? And I hear what Councillor Chilvers says. We go up to 44, we then have to buy a new lorry. And then it becomes totally unviable. So what's the sweet spot? Where should we be with our contract, bearing in mind our contract? What's the sweet, what should we be?
I'll have a look and find the answer for that one. So if you want to ask another question, I'll try and find the answer from the contract. All right.
Yeah, the other thing was, is the cost of new bins, do you get, if you subscribe to a new postage stamp new build, they want a green bin, do they just pay the circa 50 quid and they get a bin, or do they have to pay for the bin?
The first time that you buy a permit, you get the bin. It includes the bin.
So if I was to have a permit, buy a bin, and then the following year dip out for, say, a couple of years, and then buy a permit again, would I then get a new bin?
I mean, if you wanted one. No, the way the web form is designed, it asks if you have already got a bin. It's not intelligent enough to know whether or not you've had a permit before, but people generally don't want more than one bin because they're always asking us to pick up bins they don't want. But there is a possibility that you could get 2 green bins, but to get them emptied, you'd have to buy 2 permits.
No, it's more like you don't bother one there, then you take it down the tip and dump it there. I just wonder on how we can work the cost of the bin in somewhere. But where do we need to be to break even? I think that's, and I do think we do have to keep the price down, because I think we're going on what Councillor Chilvers says. The more you put it up, then you drop it off. If you drop the price, it goes up. So, and as Councillor Phillips said about if you knock over 50 quid or whatever it was, I think it does put people off. It's one of the first things to be dropped.
I think Mr. Rollins wants to come in on the break-even point.
Yeah, so while I don't have that to hand, it's worth bearing in mind that would be looking at that individual charge in isolation from the overall picture of the council's finances. So if we were to set a charge that was merely covering that break-even point, and that was our sole focus, that would leave a gap within our MTFS that would need to be met by other changes. So would that potentially might mean that other fees have to go up, or other services have to be reviewed and changes made. So yeah, in terms of the break-even point, yeah, Ms. Court will go and have a look at that, and I can help her with that work. But it's thinking of that bigger strategic picture as well, that if we do set everything at a break-even point, we know that some of the other services in the council don't get covered by fees and charges, and we don't have the level of funding to support that, and then there would be a gap elsewhere that the change programme would have to address.
Yeah, but that's why we tend to set a budget, and with so many columns, you can't hope to get everyone right. You hope at the end of the year that you're not too short, that some make more, some make less, and at the end of the year, you've balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Thank you, Councillor Barton. Councillor Hales.
Thank you, Chair. It links into one of the comments from Councillor Barton in terms of, obviously, one of the issues that residents raised is when it comes through in April and when people apply for a green bin, it's obviously quite a significant amount of money. So one of the questions is, could we look at doing direct debits for the green bin? Because if I look at direct debits come out of my account, it's Disney, Netflix, loads and loads of different things. Actually, the figure actually is very negligible. And obviously at the moment, when residents have to pay for one bin at, say, 50, whatever it may be in terms of doing that, it's a big hit, and actually it makes it aware. So I suppose the question is that something that could come forward from a direct debit scheme instead?
Yes, that is something that we're looking at. We would have liked to have done it for the garden waste permits for next year, but I think because of the CRM waste project, we haven't been able to look at designing that process, but it is something that we are interested in looking at. They go on sale in February, but we could have it so that you opt into the direct debit scheme at any point in the year. And I think there was pros and cons for looking to introduce that, but it is on our programme of work to do for the next permit. For what would that be? 27, 20, yeah. So we'll keep you posted on that, because there are quite a lot of people that are keen on us doing that.
Thank you. Do you want to?
Just briefly, I know that Councillor Roberts would want to say that he is keen on that happening, but it's about trying to work out that work programme. So I think the number one thing we're saying is trying to do a trial of the green bags activity to come in next summer, particularly aimed at new properties. And the next thing is the direct debit. I think there's all kinds of work programme things that we'd like to be able to do, and we just have to be realistic about what is achievable and try and prioritise appropriately.
Councillor Hales?
Yeah, if I can come back. So I suppose it goes back to a point Councillor Dixon made earlier on. So I know we don't like to look at it, but we are a business, and actually if you look after your customers you've got there, rather than having to look in terms of with green bins, which is something you might have to bring out which may or may not work, actually if we've got customers there that are struggling at the moment with the finance paying a one-off cost, to me it would make more sense to look after the customers we've got and say, actually, if we go to a direct debit scheme, that may keep a high level of the permits continue coming in and may increase it, rather than looking at a green bag, which we don't know, may work, may not, may be brilliant. But I suppose I would almost flip it and say, look after the customers you've got at the moment, make sure that they're tied in and they're paying on a monthly basis, and then the green bag ones can come afterwards. That would be my view from a business point of view in terms of what you do with your customers.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. I think the mention of customer is a very interesting one here, because I guess it feels to me we don't quite yet, we've seen a dip in demand, we don't really understand why that is. And we're also proposing to bring in new services as well. There is, of course, a risk that we end up with some cannibalisation, which, and I think I would probably urge, and it might be a comment we wish to make, that actually we do some proper research to understand what's going on here. We're making an assumption at the moment about whether that, but you may wish to respond to that, Zoe.
I think, we are interested in exploring the garden sacks, but it would be a new income stream. We don't want to impact the bin permit, so it does need to be looked at really closely and modelled. And we know of authorities that already offer that, and it's very successful. So we need to discuss with them, and we also need to think about that price to make it attractive, but also realistic and in line with what we sell our wheel bin permits for. I think that was it, wasn't it?
Great, thank you. Just quick, I've got a lot of members wanting to come in. So if you just make it quick, that would be good.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the work that we've done on the CRM that Ms. Court alluded to, that work does give us a lot more data in terms of our customers, the trends and what our customers are doing, the demographics that are signing up and the areas in which they are signing up. So the more data we get, the better we can do that for future forecasting.
Right, thank you. I think even knowing things like, is this decline due to people going from 1 bin to 0 bins, or is it from 2 bins to 1 bin, 3, etc.? That would be helpful for us to understand a little bit more. So, right, so I've got Councillor Whiteman, then Councillor Dixon, Councillor Luckhurst, Councillor Dray, all on bins. So, Councillor Whiteman.
Thank you. This point has partly, very largely probably, been already answered by Councillor Chilvers. And I appreciate as well, it's probably a question that would have sat better in the overall strategy rather than specifically the green bins. The elasticity point, you did cover it, but I must admit I was a little bit surprised to hear initially when you were saying that before it was almost not appreciated, the elasticity of the demand and the fact that we were kind of just putting things up blindly without really realising the impact. So it's great that that's been addressed, it's great that it's been recognised. Still a little bit surprised that there isn't better data out there, you know, because I heard you in your response saying, well, actually, you know, somebody else is having a bit of a stab in the dark. Is that really the case? Because I would have thought this was an area where nationally there must be some pretty good data about how elastic the demand for some of these services is. And I would have thought our strategy ought to be undermined, not just the green bins, probably across the board. You know, how do we maximise revenue? I mean, there may be reasons why we don't want to in certain cases and other factors. I know we factor that in, but surely there is better data on the elasticity of demand of some of these services that would underpin our strategy and really sort of drive how we maximise the revenue.
Mr. Rollins?
A lot of the challenges we have is that green waste charging is still in its infancy. So a number of councils have only recently introduced it, so we haven't had it going particularly long. Some of our peers and neighbours have had it going for an even shorter period of time. So actually you tend to build up that database and trend analysis where you can look at things such as elasticity over a period of time. And just the data sets are just not there at the moment. So when you have years like the current year that we're in, where you do have anecdotal impacts of weather, where there is that perception that we haven't had to use our bin that often, because we've never had a scenario like that since we introduced the service, and we'd introduced it relatively early in the cycle from when you could do it. We don't have that clear ascertain whether it is directly linked to that or not. If we have another year like that next year, for example, it would provide that more detailed confirmation of the judgments that we've made this year. So really it's just because the charging mechanisms are still in their infancy.
I mean, so that probably shows that the green bins was a bad example really to raise the point in regards to, but I suppose it's great that we're addressing it, but I suppose really the thing I'm looking for overall is, are we, where it is available, you know, adopting a more sophisticated approach to this issue? Because it strikes me as a bit of a no-brainer. I was a bit surprised that we perhaps had a slightly naive approach, and great that we are addressing it, but in the services across the board where there must be more data available, because I take your point, green charges may be relatively recent, but there are some of these charges that have been, you know, in place for as long as the hills. Are we adopting a more sophisticated approach using national data and really using it where it is available to maximise our revenue?
It's probably fair to say it depends on the service, so we don't have a consistent approach across the council. A good example of where we do that would be leisure services, so we have quite a good working relationship with our provider Everyone Active. With the new leisure centres, we've had open book arrangements that have enabled us to look at the data and work together in terms of the overall picture is ultimately around the income, the total income generated, not the actual charges. That's one of the mechanisms that gets you to that overall figure. And it's changing that mindset within the council. I've been at this council for around 10 years, and as Councillor Chilvers alluded to, in the past it was a case of charges just went up by 2%, and it didn't appear that there was that much science behind it. Interest rates were quite low, sticking them up by 1 or 2%. People are not going to notice potentially, and that sort of attitude. So our approaches across the service areas has matured in recent years, and some of that has been driven by the challenges of the economic environment, high inflation, high interest rates, and actually you can't, and the cost of delivering those services going up at significant levels. And is it realistic for us to, if a service like leisure, where we had high utility costs to deliver those services. Is it realistic to then pass all that on to the consumer in a big hit? You know, utility charges in some years went up by 25-30%, but we know a customer would not pay 30% more to use those concession services. So it's around having those conversations with our providers and with the service areas to make sure that we are striking a balance to ensure that ultimately we're achieving the strategic aims of the organisation, and one of those is around financial sustainability, which means that the overall total figures in Appendix 1 are the key ones that we measure against.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. I think that is also some of the richness that we're hoping to see from the commercial strategy when it comes forward. Sorry to mention it again, but that's why it's important for us to get there. Right, thank you, Councillor Whiteman. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, actually, I was really interested in the decline of permits, actually, this year, and the explanation given because of the weather. So obviously I spoke to my opposite numbers at Rugby and also at Stratford as well, and it was certainly borne out at Stratford. At Rugby, they have actually seen an increase in income, albeit a consistent level of fewer bin permits being sold. The big difference is that in a place like Rugby, they only have roughly a 50% penetration, a number of households having a green bin compared to 60%. And to some extent, we're a victim of previous success in getting people to adopt the bins that are there. As for getting more new houses or households to take a green bin, yes, I think that's a good idea, although judging by the amount of casework I get from new homeowners who complain that nothing grows in their garden because of the quality of the soil underneath and just left by the builders, good luck with that one as well. The thing that does strike me is we have here roughly somewhere between 38 and 40,000 opportunities to see for an advertiser on our green bins, and I just wonder whether that has been looked at as a potential source of income.
It's a very good idea. We are sort of increasing the amount of advertising and sponsorship that we do. As you know, it's on the website, and we've recently took over a load of roundabout signs. You might have seen that advertise your business here. So that is something that we can take away and have a look at. I know that I think it's the county council. I mean, it's not a paid-for advert, but they do a lot of the speed awareness signs, don't they, on the wheelie bins that are really they stand out. So yeah, we can take that away and see if there's any interest in it as part of the work I'm doing on sponsorship.
Great, thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Luckhurst, then Councillor Dre.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Have you looked at any ideas along the lines of like sign up now to beat the price increase, that kind of thing, like get a year of the previous year's price as part of the push to kind of recruit new people, new customers, if I'm allowed to use that word?
When we were working with Stratford District Council really closely, they did offer an early bird discount. I think it was the first year that they introduced the garden waste charges, and they said that they wouldn't do it again, if I'm remembering correctly. So I think it was a £5 discount, but in the rush for people to sign up, it was very hard for the staff to cope with that amount of requests. So it isn't something that we've looked at. It's the same price no matter when you sign up, and even if you sign up, in the late summer, you still pay the full charge. And I think if we did introduce an early bird discount, we might get complaints that I only moved into my property on X and I've not been able to save that. It's something that we can look at as part of a review when we're speaking to other councils about the garden waste sacks and see what their experiences have been. But it's not something that we've done to date, no.
Thank you, Jen. Also, just to go back to Councillor Hales saying possibly making it a monthly fee, direct debit, like everyone. I suppose the advantage of that is that you people will see it as a much lower fee, like £5 something every month. Although the disadvantage, I suppose, is if you're looking at things to cut, you might just look at your monthly outgoings rather than an annual one. So you've got to balance those out, I suppose.
I think the administration of that scheme would be very hard to resource. And I think if we were looking to introduce a direct debit scheme, I'm not sure it would be to split payments, potentially into two, but I think if we split it any further, you know, there is a temptation for that direct debit to be cancelled, and we would continue to collect the waste. At what point would we be aware? And then we'd have to, you know, you've got the permit by then. I just think it would be really difficult to administer that. So it's not something I think would be successful, but we will look at what other councils do as part of this work.
Great, thank you. Mr. Rollins, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, it was around the discount. So in terms of our numbers and the numbers that we've seen, around 80% of our permits are sold before the year commences. So the risk is that by offering a discount, you are just reducing the amount of income generated from customers that were going to sign up anyway. So you may not potentially attract new customers, you may just be benefiting customers, recurring customers. A number of businesses or organisations that typically offer early bird discounts generally do it from a cash flow perspective. So if you're an event, for example, you may offer tickets earlier at a lower price because you've got the high cost of putting on that event maybe up front. And so actually it's around getting cash into the business to support any fees that you've got to pay, or, you know, if you've talked about an event, you know, maybe artists or things like that, and concessions. So you may want to bring in cash earlier, and with this service it doesn't really fit that mould. And from the initial work we've done and working with Stratford, they saw that actually it had a detrimental impact on their overall income generated.
Thank you. Councillor Drake.
Yes, it's just a problem that we've got around Warwick and Leamington, probably Kenilworth as well, the whole of the district, is that there's a lot of dog mess around, and I was just wondering if we've got bins around for that, for people to put the mess in. And also, if, you know, you could fine people, if you find them, for leaving that mess around. There's so many complaints about that all the time. And that would definitely generate some income if you could catch them and fine them. And if you've got maybe an employee from Ida Verde could do it, or an inspector could be employed by the council to go around looking and seeing.
So, Councillor Dray, sorry, I think it's an interesting point. I don't think it's quite relevant to the fees and charges paper, because I think what we're being asked to do is scrutinise the paper that's in front of us. So, if it's okay, I'm going to move on, and maybe it might be something to pick up with officers offline. Because I think you're right. It is an important point. Councillor Rossi.
Thank you, Chair. Was just regarding the previous conversation. I was wondering if it's feasible to add the green waste permit as an extra council tax, because that way it will help with the direct debit as well to spread the cost. So rather than being a separate charge, if it can be included in the council tax bill.
So, right, I'm conscious of time, and I think there's some interesting discussion here. I think we're starting to get a little bit off the topic of the green bins. I think we've given it quite a good level of scrutiny. What I would suggest to members is actually we take a comment back to Cabinet to really express that there was a good level of discussion about the green bins fees. I think members are concerned about the impacts on our ongoing finances, and that actually it's very important for us to understand the reasons for customer behaviour and the data behind it, so that we can actually make the right decisions on the strategy going forward. I think if members are happy with that, some comments. Otherwise, we are going to we'll keep generating ideas for creating more revenue, but we can't really test them in this.
Just coming on that, the council tax in terms of assessing it is not a discretionary fee. So one of the challenges that if you were to bring those together, you've got a discretionary fee versus a statutory fee. so that they're likely that we wouldn't be able to bring them in together on one thing, because ultimately people have to opt in to having a green waste, whereas people don't opt into paying council tax.
Great, thank you, Mr. Rollins. Right, okay, I'm going to move on from green bins, if that's okay. Can we, crematorium, we did discuss earlier, and I think it came up in terms of, actually there's a real commercial edge there, and I understand that commercial gov are helping us with some of that there. Do members have other questions about crematorium? Councillor Barton, then Councillor Rossi.
Yeah, I thank you for delving deeper into costs and that you intimated earlier. Could you tell me whether you talked to local funeral directors and asked their opinion of our charges, because they are directly our customer? Now whether direct funerals are probably out of our grasp now, because I think there's a private one in Nuneaton now, and I know a lot of people go that way. But on the service we offer, I was at a funeral this week, and the service we offer is brilliant. I just wondered whether we talked to local funeral directors to get their input, as that they sell us, they're the people that sell us.
Yeah, the bereavement services manager does a lot of benchmarking when she's looking to do her fees and charges, and they work really closely with all of the local funeral directors. One of the issues that we have got is lots of the larger funeral directors are part of another company that have got a direct cremation business as well. So in a way, it wouldn't matter to some extent what our fee is. We could never compete directly with some of the prices for the direct funerals, but that's a piece of work that we're doing a feasibility study with Commercial Gov at the moment on that.
Okay, I appreciate that, because I know a lot of people in that business. Can I just ask whoever wrote these figures just one question? On page, Appendix A1, page 9, neighbourhood services, halfway down we've got crematorium, cremation 1.5. Then we've got crematorium, cremation other. Now, I'm not the best with figures, but I can't seem to get them to add up. The actual so far is 53k, the budget was 17k, and the forecast is 19k. We're losing 30k somewhere.
The actuals are from the prior year. The second column is the budget that we've set for the current year, 25-26. And the third column is the latest forecast for this current year. So really the comparison is between column 2, the 17,700 and the 19,800. So actually the forecast is for this year that fee generating whatever comes in the other category, which no doubt Appendix B covers, and Appendix A2, we're actually forecasting an increase in income on what we set at budget setting in February.
Forgive me, I appreciate that, but what happened in 24-25 to give us 53, where this year we're forecast at 19? What happened in 24-25 to get it up to 53,000?
Can you just remind Mr. Rollins of the page that you're looking at? Oh, you've got it, right.
I'd have to go back and have a look at that.
Great, thank you. Councillor Barton, Councillor Rossi.
Excuse me, I could just add to just clarify on that one. A lot of the, you'll see under the crematorium area, there's a number of areas there that we've got listed. And the financial system's been been coding against certain codes. Now, what some of the service areas have been doing, they've been working on they might have had codes of income all on one particular code, and now they're trying to split things out. And what you'll probably find is on there is you had a load of income that wasn't just crematorium other, it was other bits and pieces from going in there as well. And what they've done now is looked at actually moving those to the other headings, so they're actually showing in the right areas now. But what you've actually got, so for example, the 17,700 is actually what the correct budget should have been for 25-26, and now they're forecasting 19,800. whereas the 53 before the actuals were actually not just actuals of crematorium other, but they might have had other bits of, you know, for example, from like the interments or something out of the other kind of areas. So that's the reason for that.
Right, thank you, Mr. Sidhu. That was helpful. Councillor Rossley.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I was looking at Rainsbrook because we said that they're one of the major competitors on direct cremations. And when we see the fees and charges, they have a direct cremation fee of £660. We've got 550. And they have a cremation fee with service. They've got £1,050, and we increased it to 1,185. Now, the one where we were competitive, we decided to keep it the same. And the one where we are not competitive, we decided to increase it. I was just wondering what's the reason behind that, because it doesn't seem to be commercially aware.
I must admit, I've only prepped for garden waste permit questions, so I will take that one away and speak to my bereavement services manager, unless I don't think it's something that you can answer. I'll speak to my bereavement services manager and I'll come back to you as soon as I can. All right.
It probably won't help in terms of this year's charge, so we'd have to go back and have a look at that. But I know we did review them in prior years, and some of the charges are linked to the facility we've got as well, and capacity management at the facility. So it's making sure that some of the services we do offer fit around other services that we offer within that facility. So if you've got a service, for example, there may be gaps, and it's around maximising the capacity of Oakley Wood, for example. So that it may look odd perceptually if certain charges have gone up and demand's changed, but that's because we're pushing demand towards other services that may overall generate more income for the bereavement services function.
Okay, any other questions on bereavement services? Okay, so can I suggest we again just say it was one of the areas we talked about, and we note the commercial gov work that's coming, and look forward to that arriving. Right, moving on, just leisure. I don't mind asking a question from the chair here, just around the Kenil. So I'm interested about the Kenilworth leisure fees, because we're anticipating, hopefully, that the swimming pool will be open in the next financial year, but yet we don't have the charges for that. Is there a reason for that?
I know this is a question that did get raised through the process, so I know that it is aware that we do need to set fees for Abbey Fields. So, Mr. Rollins, have you?
Yeah, so I've spoken with the manager of the service, and ultimately it's a conversation that still needs to take place between WDC and everyone active. The focus at the moment is primarily on getting the site ready to be opened. I believe the forecast date for opening is the 3rd of April. Those conversations are going to be taking place imminently. And then we'll be able to see how they sit against the other service areas, the other leisure centres that we have.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm grateful to hear that. That's consistent with what I've heard for the pools opening with water in them as well, which would be good news. That will also have a knock-on impact when you're looking at the head count, the number of customers going into the pools on car parking as well, both in Abbey Fields, Square West and Abbey End car park as well. So there should, as well as being income coming from Abbey Fields swimming pools, there should also be an increase in income that's factored into from car parks as well.
Great, thank you. Councillor Dixon. Councillor Falp.
I'm getting confused here. We don't charge the same fee for every leisure centre? You know, why should I have to pay more or less if I go to Kenilworth or if I go to Leamington or Warwick? to me, it's a Warwick District pool, and I would expect to pay exactly the same. So why? To me, you just, charges are there. That's what you're paying at leisure, already for leisure.
Mr. Rollins?
Yeah, it probably is a reasonable expectation, but because those conversations haven't taken place, we can't make that decision on behalf of everyone active. So there is a likelihood that they will be in line with the other leisure centres. The other leisure centres are contractually committed to certain maximum limits of what they can charge as well, whereas Abbeyfield, in effect, is a new facility, so it does have that discretion to charge differently. Whether that actually happens is probably unlikely, but because we haven't had that agreement with everyone active yet, it still has to remain as an unmade decision.
Councillor Fowle.
I think we'll all be very cross if, you know, kennels are paying less or, you know, put more. So I really hope that discussion goes, and if it doesn't go that way, that it's the same. I think we as councillors need to know that and the real reason why.
So perhaps a simple note to Cabinet on this one might be that actually could that conversation happen as quickly as possible, please, to give councillors the certainty about parity of fees across the district. Councillor Chilvers.
Just a bit of a side issue, that asterisk says Abbeyfields Leisure Centre is expected to open in April 2026. I just want to do a little tiny bit of expectations management because I know there was something that was published in NUB News about the date of opening, and there was a little bit of lack of clarity about the relationship between the handover date and the actual opening date of the swimming pool with water in, with all the training. So the programme lead is still just finalising that, and we are expected to have a more firm opening date ready to be able to tell everyone by the end of the year. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Okay, we'll just be very disappointed if it's not the 3rd of April. Councillor Chilvers. Councillor Falp and Councillor Jones.
I do need to know when to buy the new costume. So, you know, if you let us know in plenty of advance notice so I can, you know, officially swim up and down in the new pool, please.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a quick follow-up to Councillor Falp's original item about the parity of fees. I think it's important to make sure that we are not necessarily therefore giving a licence to charge fees equal to the most expensive one that is currently there. It's all well and good having parity fees, but it's important to make sure that we are suggesting that we try and keep those fees affordable for residents in the cost of living situation.
Councillor Chilvers.
I will be definitely taking this conversation about fees back to Councillor Sinnott, who will be the portfolio holder for leisure, to make sure that he is appraised of this conversation.
Thank you. You can look forward to some questions at Cabinet, at Council. I've not asked him one for a little while. So. Right, members, thank you. Good discussion. Thank you to everyone who's contributed this evening. Are there any other matters that we wish to consider? Okay, I will take that as a no and say thank you very much and close the meeting.